right, we are back for another edition of If It Was Rebooted. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite sitcoms, Seinfeld. Now, Seinfeld started in 1989 and it ran all the way to 1998, giving it 9 seasons. When it was time to renew for a 10th season, Jerry Seinfeld said he didn't want to do it, even though they offered him an insanely huge amount of money to produce a 10th season. But regardless, we still have 9 seasons of crazy antics following Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer, all getting themselves into some crazy situations. And for a show about nothing, it actually had some really pivotal things that were actually about something. So it was kind of a genius marketing plan to base the whole show about a show about nothing. Now, it is next to impossible to talk about all the iconic episodes. They go on and on, from the Soup Nazi to the contest to the opposite episode to Bizarro Jerry. You know, there are just so many iconic, memorable episodes of Seinfeld. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some stinkers too, but all in all, it was a masterpiece of writing. So the question is what would happen if by some fluke Jerry Seinfeld decided, yeah, let's reboot this show. Now, there have been reunion shows. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did a reunion show. There was a reunion show from Friends. Friends did a reunion show. You know, would they ever do a reunion show of Seinfeld? It's hard to say. Well, they tried to bring the characters into Curb Your Enthusiasm, which it was pretty cool, but it's not quite the same as Seinfeld. You could take the characters out of Seinfeld, but there's something about Seinfeld, a show that made it magical for all those characters together. Now, admittedly, a lot of the characters on Seinfeld, you know, they weren't really all that likable. They were terrible people. They did some terrible things. And the last episode, well, they all ended up in jail. Actually, I even knew people who skipped a huge concert just to watch the finale of Seinfeld. And they were actually really disappointed by the way that Seinfeld ended up. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I thought they could have done something a little different personally. But let's just say, for instance, Jerry Seinfeld said, yeah, let's reboot this show. I'm going to let Hollywood see what they could do with it. So the question is what would they do? Well, the obvious thing they could do is just bring back the original characters, but they're older. Maybe or maybe not they learned from their past mistakes, and most likely not. And just see them living in the same situation as they did in the original show. Maybe there would be a little bit more instances of being woke. They couldn't do certain episodes, or they couldn't do certain topics because it would be deemed way too offensive. Actually, I know younger people who, they don't like Seinfeld at all. They find it offensive. They never got into the humor. So if the studios brought it back, they may change up the humor a little bit and make it more modern friendly. Make it a little bit more woke. Another idea they could do is they could reboot the show with a whole new set of characters being played by different actors. There's no Jerry Seinfeld. There's no Michael Richards, which would be really bizarre because the show is based off of Jerry Seinfeld's name. So bringing in other actors to play those characters would be a little odd. Maybe they could bring relatives of the main actors to do it, which would be pretty weird too. It's almost like if you're going to call a TV show Seinfeld, you sort of need a Seinfeld. I don't think bringing anybody back but Jerry Seinfeld would make any sense or be any good. But I could see them trying to do that. You know, they rebooted How I Met Your Mother with How I Met Your Father, so maybe they could do some kind of a weird spin-off of the characters of Seinfeld just being portrayed by other people, but that would be really weird. A lot of times when they try to bring things back, they lose that lightning in a bottle that they had the first time around. And I can't see them being able to strike twice with a hit. I think people would tune in because they have a love of the original series and they want to try to relive some of their memories and some of their upbringing and childhood. They want to relive those good memories that they had for the first season. And maybe they think that the reboot would give them some of those initial feelings. They tried to do that with Will and Grace. They tried to bring that back. And that was a fairly good, and that was successful. But I don't know if it could work for Seinfeld. But I'm sure if they felt there was money to be made and Seinfeld allowed them to do it, I'm sure they would give it a go and try to generate that intellectual property into some money. So what would I do if I had the rights to reboot or remake Seinfeld? What would I do? Well, for starters, I definitely wouldn't bring them back as older versions of themselves. I would just leave the original series, the 9 seasons, alone. But what I would do is I would take the character, which I think is the most interesting character of Kramer, and I would do a Kramer backstory, much like they did with young Sheldon. I would do a young Kramer. Because Kramer, you don't know too much about his upbringing. Now, you met his mother Babs in some of the episodes, so you know a little bit about her. You don't know anything about Kramer's father. Kramer's a very unique person. So you would see his childhood interactions being very awkward and interesting. And I think that would build a really interesting world where you have this young Cosmo Kramer trying to fit in with other people at his school, getting into hijinks, just really funny, out there ideas based around the character of Cosmo. I think it could be really good if it was done right. I thought they did a really good job with young Sheldon. They had a really good actor who played the character. They did that with young Chris. They've done it with young Sheldon. They did it with young Rock. They've done this idea many times before, and I think it could work with Kramer as well. Of course, it would be silly. Kramer's really silly. Actually, Kramer's probably the least detestable character on Seinfeld. So he does have likability to him. He's just a little odd. So that would be my idea